You were told lies about your PhD, and I'm here to set the record straight about 3 misconceptions you need to know about when you finish your PhD. There's so much joy in doing research and being a PhD student in terms of learning, studying different techniques, going out into the field, meeting participants or patients, culminating a lot of findings and producing a wonderful story that ends up being your thesis. But throughout the different postdoc experiences I have had, and being a PhD supervisor, and now actually being away from academia, there's a few misconceptions that I've seen myself and other people have that unfortunately need to be talked about, so then you have a better experience when you finish your PhD. So without further ado, let's talk about the first misconception. So the first one is the notion that you are a niche expert when you finish a PhD, not a field one. Now, to put this into context, my PhD was in vascular pharmacology, and I cannot say I am an expert in the field of vascular biology or pharmacology. I'm just a niche expert in a particular part of the vascular system and a particular part of pharmacology. I'm not a pharmacologist, nor am I a vascular scientist. So you can understand that when you finish your PhD, you're not an expert in the field at that stage. If you were to go down the traditional academia route and you do a few postdocs in the area, you become a lecturer, senior lecturer, professor, then you can say at that point you are an expert in the field. A lot of people are professors in molecular biology, professors in immunology, professors in computer science. Then they are an expert in the field. But as a PhD graduate, you're an expert in a particular part of that field that only probably 5 or 10 people know, just like you do, around the world, which is pretty cool, but also a reality check, which is we don't know a lot. So we have to understand and appreciate that concept that when you finish your PhD, be aware that you might have a lot of pressure self-imposed and by others when you're applying for different roles, that you are an expert in the field. You're happy to say that, no, I'm a niche expert in the field of X, Y, or Z, and then my PhD in this area. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about other areas, but I do know a lot about this, and my skills and my experiences are transferable to different parts of the field that I was in, or into a different field entirely. So be aware that you are a niche expert, not a field one. So, question is, what is misconception? This one really got me because it's the notion of employability and having a PhD. Now, I used to think before I started my PhD and when I did my PhD, and even actually after, that having a PhD makes you more employable. Problem is, it actually in reality doesn't. And this hit home like a ton of bricks, that a lot of people who had PhDs were applying for roles that didn't require one, and they were up against people who didn't have a PhD, and they were actually better candidates because they had more suited experience in the role that they were applying. Now, you can imagine, to no disrespect to other candidates, but you would think or you would assume that having a PhD would set you far out, but unfortunately for certain roles it's not required, and it actually comes at a detriment because you might be overqualified, which is the number of things. 2, you might not be needed in that because you might not need a research role because maybe more teaching experience is needed. So you can imagine that it's not, unfortunately, as glorified as it maybe sometimes should be, depending on what job you applied for. But when you're applying for roles in terms of teaching in certain areas of academia, certain industry roles, a PhD is not required, and it doesn't actually make you more employable, because sometimes it can be at your detriment. So irrespective of the research field that you might be into, or you might be considering doing a PhD, and this is still important, don't assume that, okay, I'm going to do a PhD because it's going to help me to get better jobs. It doesn't. If that's your viewpoint, and you don't know much about academia or industry, and you just think doing a PhD will help you, you will suffer in your PhD. And if you somehow manage to finish one, you will be back to where you were before, because a PhD still won't actually massively increase your chances of getting the jobs. Now, to hit home this and to make it sure that it resonates with all of you, my role right now, I am not in academia for but over maybe 7 or 8 months, and partly that is due to my inability to apply for roles that actually require a PhD, but I was unsuccessful because of all the issues I've mentioned in previous videos and the main video on my channel, PhD Decide You Don't See, link is in the video description as well. I was unable to put papers in, because I didn't get paid for my PhD, and all of that stuff is already there. I won't go into it in detail. I was unable to apply for roles that required a PhD and even didn't require a PhD. I remember when I finished my PhD, I was applying for a lab technician role, Unfortunately, I didn't get it because I was overqualified and didn't have suited experience. I even applied for certain areas in research, but unfortunately I was overqualified or I didn't have the right experience. So a PhD doesn't mean it makes you more employable unless you're looking at the right roles. So be wary of that, and if you are considering doing a PhD, be wary that the PhD itself doesn't just make you employable. If you have an idea that you want to contribute to knowledge and you have ideas to go into academia or industry or stuff, that's fair enough. That's a good reason to do a PhD. But it's not a good reason to do a PhD if you're thinking it's going to help you to apply for new jobs. Misconception number 3. Now, generally, misconception itself has a bad turn, but this third one is a positive misconception that I'm hoping to help you understand. And that is how universal a PhD actually is. Now, if you were to take other, you can say, roles and accreditations in the healthcare fields, for example, being a medical doctor or a pharmacist or a nurse, so a lot of these kind of clinical professionals, so being an optometrist as well, if you were to do that in the UK where I am based, and then you wanted to become an optometrist somewhere else, you would need to do conversion courses or even conversion degrees in order for you to practice that in a different field. Now, the argument you might have is that, okay, these are actual healthcare clinical skills that require you to be on governing bodies, for example, the medical council if you were to do medicine, the nursing council, the GPHC. I should know this because I help edit Microform, which is a digital platform business to help pharmacists in the UK that I'm a video editor for. That has a very pharmaceutical council that you need to be very accredited for in the UK. Now, if you were to be a pharmacist somewhere else, again, a medic somewhere else, you would need conversion degrees to do that. Now, yes, a lot of PhD doctorates are not clinical specialists. They have clinical skills, so a lot of them can do certain clinical tasks that others do in terms of venipuncture and similar basic tasks that you can't prescribe. Of course, you can't do those things, I understand, but the point I'm trying to make is, if you were to want to do research somewhere else, you can go do research somewhere else. Many colleagues I know who are postdocs are from different countries. They did a PhD somewhere else, they were able to do research somewhere else. And this is the point that I'm trying to make. PhD is very universal. If you did a PhD in one country, you are able to do a postdoc in another country. It's actually advised. If you wanted to become a lecturer or professor in a different country, you can do. Whereas other courses, other accreditations and degrees require you to do some form of conversion course in order for you to be that profession. So if it's an accountant, as I said, pharmacist, nurse, doctor, whatever it is, you wouldn't be able to just pack up shop and go somewhere else. Whereas if you are a researcher and you have a PhD, you can. So this is a positive misconception I wanted to help you understand, that if you are considering doing a PhD and you think you'll be stifled because you did it in a certain country, majority of countries around the world allow and advocate for this flux and exchange of researchers from different countries. There's people I know who are in New Zealand, in Australia, in the UK to Canada, from Canada to India, to Italy, to Belgium. There's people all over the place doing a PhD in one country and doing research in another country quite easily, quite happily. So keep that in mind if you are considering a profession. If you're considering doing a PhD and you're already at one right now, remember, the world is your oyster. If you have the ability, if you don't have maybe too many kind of responsibilities or commitments where you are, go for it. Because research can really help in terms of allowing you to travel, allowing you to meet new people, new cities, new countries. It's a great way in order for you to experience the other parts of the world that you might not be able to do if you were in other professions. Now, if you're looking to apply for a PhD, video over here is about my top tips for a PhD application. If you've got a friend who's interested, do let them know about that video. I am Aamir saying, if you want to subscribe, you can do. Link down below. You can see the subscribe button right here, or is here. I think it's here. Yeah, probably here. If you can, that'd be super helpful. And I shall see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care.